What up, Cavs Nation? I'm your host, Ethan Sands, and I'm back with another episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. It's just me today. It's another solo dolo episode of the Wine and Gold Talk pod, and I'm coming to you after having some fun this Sunday evening, going to a Cleveland Guardians game, getting to see another win for the Guards. But we're here to talk about the team across the block, the Cleveland Cavaliers. And for today's podcast, I want to talk to you guys about my top 5 picks for them to go and get with the number 20 overall selection in this year's draft class. This is going to be a long draft week where me and Chris go into details about who we think could be selected, why, and other things. We will be putting out articles to go along with these podcasts to go more in depth, but I'm going to start with my top 5. Chris is not here today, but we're going to get into it anyway. So, with my top 5, what I was thinking and what we understand the Cavs to need this offseason is two-way wings, guys that are power forwards and small forwards that can also bring the ball up, shoot the ball from deep, and contribute not only in a rotational role, but also in a starting role if needed, depending on what the Cavs do this offseason when they go and get guys. But the main thing for me was, can these guys shoot the basketball at a decent percentage from three-point range while also being able to shoot just from the field? And I think it's important to note that when we talk about shooting, it does not have to mean that the guy is taking like minimum shots. It's about volume. It's about what the average is for these guys shooting and what the percentage is looking like as well. Because if they're just shooting 0.1%, averaging 1.1 shots from beyond the arc per game, that's going to skew what their average is. It can make it look better than it actually is. But these guys are guys that I've seen that have taken at a higher volume, probably around 2 to 4 or 5 3-point attempts per game, and been able to knock them down. So let's get into my top 5, and I'm going to start with a guy that you guys have heard us talk about recently, and that's Johnny Furphy. Johnny Furphy is a Kansas Jayhawks freshman. He's 6'8", 202 pounds, and he's, like I said, coming off his freshman year in Kansas. He averaged 9 points per game. He shot 35.2% from deep while taking 3.8 attempts from that range per game. He shot 46.6% from the field, and he also was able to grab 4.9 rebounds. So, like I said, Furphy is 6'8". So that means he's got the length to be a halfway decent defender, but he's also got the ability to shoot the basketball. Like I said, that's going to be my main point of view, but I also think that the upside for this kid is really high because he's a freshman. He's not that old, and he's been able to make an impact and make a name for himself. And also, these are guys that we realistically see still being on the board at number 20, and Furphy being a young stud up-and-comer is definitely going to be available in my eyes at number 20. So, the next guy on my list comes from Duke, Kyle Filipowski. He's a sophomore after his sophomore year. He's 6'11", 248 pounds. And we know that the guys at Duke be putting the work in. And he was a guy that had a big name even after his sophomore year. And that's a program that is known to be able to put stars out. You guys remember Jason Tatum from the Boston Celtics, obviously. But there is a definite lineage from going to Duke University into the pros, and I think it's something to take note of going forward, but also understanding that this is a weaker draft class, so hopefully Kyle will still be on the board because he averaged 16.4 points per game. He was able to grab 8.3 rebounds and average 1.5 blocks and 1.1 steals. He also shot 34.8% from 3 on 3.1 3-point attempts a game, and he was actually able to get over 50.5 field goal percentage average for the season, which is really good when he was taking 12.1 shots per game. If you think about the Cavs' current lineup and current roster, they got Jared Allen as the center, Evan Mobley as the four, and we also understand that there was a time where the Cavs had almost 3 7-footers on a roster on a starting lineup. And that is a possibility again if Kyle Filipowski finds his way to the Cleveland Cavaliers, because you understand that he is a guy that can stretch the floor. We know that the Cavs need that if they stick with the two big lineup with Evan Mobley and Jared Allen, because especially if Evan Mobley can continue to grow his outside shot, the possibilities to stretch the floor while maintaining Jared Allen in the paint to grab offensive rebounds, which he was so great at this season, is a real high point. And seeing that Kyle Filipowski was able to shoot the rock at a high clip, and he was also able to grab boards himself, he averaged just 2.2 offensive rebounds per game. But thinking about what he was able to do on the boards defensively and also what he was able to do shooting the ball, it's clear that he would fit and not take up too much space in the paint, because even though he was averaging 3.1 3-pointers per game and 12.1 field goals per game, it was obvious that he was able to both be able to create on his own and be able to create inside and out, which is important for this Cavs team. And then we get into another player that's young that I actually hold to high standing, Jalen Tyson. He is a guy who is 21 years old. He'll be 22 in December. He played 3 seasons in college at 3 different locations. He originally started at Texas, then bounced to Texas Tech for his sophomore year, then to the West Coast for his junior season at Cal. Now he's in the draft, stuck in the draft, and he's going to be selected. But I believe that he'll be able to still be on the court or on the board at number 20. So Jalen is 6'6", 215 pounds. So he's got the size and the strength with the ability to score. He averaged 19.6 points per game, 6.8 rebounds, and 3.5 assists while shooting 36% from three-point range and 46.5% from the field. So Jalen is a potential wing who could fit for the Cavs and get tested out early in his rookie season, in my eyes, because you understand the size of being 6'6", and you understand the ability to be a great defender, which is also something that he was known for at his days in Cal. I mean, he averaged 1.2 steals. He still was able to get some blocks. He averaged half a block as well. And you think about him being able to score. I mean, he shot 46.5% from the field on 15.4 attempts per game. That's pretty good, especially knowing that college kids don't take that many shots. So that means he got the keys to the offense, was able to go ahead and do his thing and create and get to the basket, but also knock down threes as well. Also important to note that he is 215 pounds, as I said earlier, so he's not going to just be thrown around. The other indication of him being a potential fit is that, like I said, with Kyle Filipowski, that he could fit with Evan Mobley and Jared Allen. Obviously, he's not 6'11" like Filipowski, but he has the ability to space the floor and also create at the cup for himself. The next player on my docket is Tristan De Silva. He is 23 years old and played all 4 years of his college career, which seems to be like basically rare in today's day and age. He's 6'8" and averaged 16 points and 5 rebounds in his final season at Colorado. What stands out the most to me with him is that he went from averaging 0.6 three-point attempts in his freshman year, making just 26.7%, and then jumping up to 4.8 three-pointers a game and making 39.5%. So like I've been saying, it's been something that I've talked on this podcast about the importance that gaining shooters and people able to knock down the tray ball will be for the spacing of this team, especially if the Cavs decide to stick with Jared Allen and Evan Mobley, as we talked about, as an abundance. And in today's age, and being coachable, being one of the biggest intangibles being seen, especially with a new head coach, seeing that Tristan was able to go from a low margin of 3-point attempts to a large margin meant that somebody came into his ear and was like, hey, kid, if you want to stay around in this league, be able to play for a long time, you're going to need to be able to shoot the ball from long distance and also be able to get yours at the cup. But he's 6'8", 220 pounds, so he's not going to get thrown around. And it feels like he could be a true wing. He's a little older than other guys that I've talked about in this class, but we saw that with Craig Porter Jr. and him being able to understand his game coming into the NBA and not have to switch into trying to figure out where he fit in. But in this case, it feels like Tristan da Silva understands what his game is. He was also born in Germany, so you understand that he might have got some extra tutelage at an earlier age in those leagues and being able to play against high-level competition at a young age. I mean, he's not old by any means, but we understand that players that have played all 4 years in college are a rarity nowadays, and it feels like he is definitely one of those. But he also has the maturity that the Cavs like, especially somebody like Craig Porter Jr. showed this past season, and Craig was an undrafted rookie. So I think Tristan could still be there at number 20 for the Cavs, but he's also been a guy that's been looked at by the Miami Heat with the number 15 overall pick in the draft. So it's hard to say if he'll still be available for the Cavs, but I think he's a good selection and somebody that you should keep your eyes on. But my last person that I have listed is someone that I might get a little hate for because he doesn't match the stereotype of the players that I think the Cavs are immediately looking for. Carlton Carrington is the last player on my current list for the Cavs to keep an eye on for their number 20 overall pick because he's young, but he's more of a guard type, guard-esque than he is a forward. He's 6'4", but just 190 pounds. So seeing him as a wing in the NBA currently is difficult because there are a lot of stronger players that he'd be up against and have to guard in today's NBA. But he has the game to be able to fit in, especially if the Cavs decide to do something with their guards around the offseason. I'm talking about if the Cavs have a plan to move away from Caris LeVert or allow Isaac Okoro to walk. We know Isaac Okoro is on a restricted free agency deal. I'll talk more about him later in today's podcast. Or if the Cavs decide to trade Darius Garland in search of a true two-way wing that's already in the NBA, we could see that the Cavs need a backup guard, backup small forward, backup point guard, backup shooting guard. And I think that Carlton could be a good fit. He's also coming off his freshman season at Pitt, so he's just 18 years old. He'll turn 19 in July. He averaged 13.8 points per game, 5 rebounds, and 4 assists, while shooting 32.2 from beyond the arc and 41.2 from the field. So you take a look at all of these guys, and besides Carlton, there is a trend when you talk about what these guys are able to accomplish, what these guys are able to do with the basketball in their hands, and what they're going to be expected to accomplish if they were to be selected by the Cavs. Play defense, get boards, and score when you have the opportunity while spacing the floor. And I think all of these guys can do that. And I just think it's more difficult for me to see Carlton Carrington being selected if the Cavs do not have a plan set in place to go and use and deal some of these other guards that they have on their roster because they've been able to gain notoriety with the organization, even though there's going to be a new head coach. So that's a different conversation because depending on what the Cavs head coach that's coming in is going to want, you can see that Carlton might be a better fit than someone who's a little bit bigger, like Caris LeVert. Or if the Cavs think that they don't need two guys that have a very similar game set, like Caris LeVert, Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, who all are driving kick kind of guys, with Donovan being the premier scorer on that list. But yeah, so I also hit up our subtexters, which you can subscribe to for $3.99 a month. And I asked them what else was on their mind for me to talk about for today. So let's get into some of these questions. First and foremost, I want to talk about the Cavs coaching search a little bit. Obviously, it is a difficult discussion because of how long it's been taking. And I do think it's fair to say that you understand that with all the different coaching hires that are being happened around the league, a lot of the different changes that are happening around the league, you have to also take into account what those teams are doing and how that is impacting the Cavs. Because you think about the Lakers just got JJ Redick. JJ Redick is also looking to get a high profile assistant coaching staff because of the necessity for him to have major help going into his first time ever coaching an NBA team and coaching anything but a fourth grade team in his entire career. So, knowing that people are mentioning Sam Cassell, who is alleged to be on the list of guys that the Lakers are going to look at. And then also thinking about how things just fit in. Like the Cavs are still looking at James Borrego. They're still looking at Kenny Atkinson. They're still looking at Micah Nori. And it's not even a sense of they're just communicating, but it's getting a sense of talking to other guys, talking to players, getting information on what the style and the need is for this team. And Chris and I have talked about it at an abundance is the fact that the Cavs could go with getting two head coach caliber guys and keeping the second one on as a top assistant. So sometimes, or maybe it's even the sense of having the conversation with guys and saying, hey, we know that you want to be the head coach, but we're going to keep you as our number two if you are ready. Because sometimes it's convincing those guys to make lateral moves with the chance of being the head coach if things go wrong coming up. Because you think about what happened with JB Bickerstaff. You think of what happened with Ty Lue. Those guys were both number twos on the coaching depth chart, and then got the opportunity because things went awry for the Cavs and the head coaching position at the time. And knowing that the Cavs want to have more of an offensive mindset this season, being able to have someone who also can lead the defense and maintain the status that they built over the last 5 to 7 years is going to be important because the Cavs for the last 5 years have held their hat on defense and being able to stop the ball whenever they needed to. And in crunch situations, that's what they leaned on. But being able to switch over to an offensive-minded team and knowing that you have the firepower to do so is different because that's not what people's mindset has been for the long haul. So I think that's what knowing where to place pieces, what coaches to bring in, and also gathering intel not on those head coaches, but also the assistant coaches and figuring out how available these guys are. Because those are also conversations. Contracts are not a simple thing to talk about, especially when you feel like you shouldn't be making a horizontal move, but should be moving up the ladder. And that's a more in-depth question. But the next question I got is from Lloyd in Mayfield Heights, and it was, how does Isaac Okoro's move to excel impact his upcoming free agency? So yeah, if you didn't know, Isaac Okoro changed who he's being represented by, and that is something that I don't feel like will truly impact his free agency. It just will impact the conversations that are being had at the time of what's going on. Because most importantly, Isaac, like I said earlier in this podcast, Isaac is a restricted free agent this year. The Cavs look to retain Isaac because he's one of those 3-and-D guys that they still see can reach up to his ceiling and continue to grow. We've seen him work on his three-point shot countless times. And all the time that I've seen Isaac Okoro, he's one of the more athletic guys on this team. He's one of the more strong guys on this team. He's been able to hold his own on the defensive end, which we know he prides himself on. And having that around is good, but you also understand that him changing representation might mean that he had a discussion with his old representation and they weren't on the same page of where he wanted to go in his career, what they wanted to do when it comes to his next steps. Because we understand Isaac Okoro is not getting any younger, and there are teams around the league that do value players like Isaac and want to have those discussions about what could his value be for our team. How much could he improve as a scorer with getting more opportunities than just some minutes and focusing mainly on defense as he does with the Cavs? If you was a starter, like we saw in spurts this season, could he score more for your team? That's talking about a different organization than the Cavs, because I do not think that Isaac Okoro is a starter for the Cavs or will be a starter for the Cavs to take the next step and get to the Eastern Conference Finals or the NBA Finals. I just don't see that happening. But how could the representation change? Is just seeing what is out there for him and what people are willing to give him. Because we talked about it, saying that probably $12 million a year might be the max that the Cavs are willing to offer him for a deal, and maybe even as low as $8 million a year. So seeing what other organizations are willing to give him and understanding if Isaac values himself to be on a championship winning team or if he wants to go chase the bag. And that is completely up to Isaac, and I wouldn't be mad at either decision. It's just figuring out where he sees his NBA career going, and only him and now his new representation know that. All right, so next question, which I thought was an interesting one, is who is your Cavs starting five if you're not allowed to select anyone from the normal starting five, which is Garland, Mitchell, Strus, Mobley, and Allen? And from if we're talking about from last year's roster, because Tristan Thompson and Marcus Morris Sr. are free agents, Isaac Okoro is a restricted free agent. We all know all of these different things, right? I think that they'd be really, really small. And I still don't think that Isaac Okoro. I think one spot could be interchangeable for this, right? So I would start Karis LeVert as a starting point guard, Sam Merrill as the starting shooting guard. I would, if we're going based on what the roster was this past season, it would depend on what team we're playing in matchups, but I would interchange Isaac Okoro or Marcus Morris Sr. at the small forward. I'd play Dean Wade at the 4 and Tristan Thompson at the 5. I don't see Damian Jones being a starter on any team in the NBA, and that's not me trying to be disrespectful. It's just me being honest about what he's able to contribute in a starting lineup. And he had flashes at the end of last season when he started to like really gain his confidence. I think that he would be good because he's also a free agent, I believe. He will also be good for another team because he has experience around the league. And he has some pull with some players that he's been around, some coaches that he's known. So we'll see. But I don't see him being an impact guy for the Cavs in this exercise. The next question is about the coaching, and it's from Evan in Lyndhurst, and he says Sam Cassell just got elevated to lead assistant with Boston. Can we just hire him now instead of some other team hiring him in the next offseason? I think Sam Cassell is a really great coach. I think he would be one of the top guys if he wasn't on this Boston squad, because you understand that the NBA finals just finished, right? The Cavs have been in this coaching search for so long. And as difficult as it has been to see the length continue, it is impossible to have thought that the Cavs would try and bring Sam Cassell during the NBA Finals, during the Boston Celtics' playoff run to Cleveland to interview for this position. And because they've gotten so far into this search, with all the guys that they've talked to, with all the other guys that they've talked to about the players, the coaches, and what these guys, their top 5 maybe that they have on this list. And it's crazy because Sam Cassell didn't have the opportunity to get interviewed by a lot of these teams during their search period because they were simply still playing. And now you look at teams like Detroit, who just got rid of Monty Williams, and if they're gonna interview Sam Cassell, whether that is a conversation that needs to be had about what teams have done during their processes already, and are they willing to bring somebody new to the conversation. And that's also why, one, Monty Williams is not going to be interviewed by the Cavs, and two, I think he's going to take a break and be able to go be with his family and take a second to realize everything that happened this past season. Also, being blindsided like that is something that is hard to come back from anyway. We had the conversation with Chris the other day. It was also being talked about whether Monty Williams wanted to coach last year or not. Also, the fact that they had the worst record in NBA history, I believe. So, yeah, that's hard to come back from in the first place. So, but with Sam Cassell, I just think the Cavs are way too deep into this coaching search to add a new name to it. Do I think that he would be a great addition to the coaching search? Yeah, but it's a time and place situation, and Sam Cassell being added now feels like it's way too late. The next question is: the Cavs previously shown interest in acquiring Miles Bridges. He still would be a great upgrade for our front line. Any sign and trade possibilities? I think that's a possibility. I mean, Miles Bridges, let's see what he averaged this past season. Miles Bridges this past season averaged 21 points with the Charlotte Hornets. He shot 46.2% from the field, 34.9% from three-point range, averaged 7.3 rebounds and 3.3 assists. He's definitely a guy that they could look for and look to trade for. He's 6'6", 225 pounds. Let's look at what his contract is situation-wise, because I know that the Charlotte Hornets are looking to get out of the hole that they've been in for a while, and keeping him partnered with LaMelo Ball is something that they think about. So Bridges is an unrestricted free agent after signing a $7.9 million buyout deal. Oh, no, sorry. Bridges signed a $7.9 million qualifying offer from Charlotte last year. After a year of having the domestic violence charge on his record, I think the Cavs have shown that in situations like these, they also weigh the personal aspects of what's going on in people's lives. And I think it's important to remember that with Miles Bridges and think about what he could mean for the organization. Sure, do they need a tough guy? Yes, they do, especially with Tristan Thompson and Marcus Morris Sr. potentially not returning to the Cavs because of free agency. But I mean, Bridges was on a $7.9 million qualifying offer. And I think if you want to say that you could sign Isaac Okoro and trade him for Miles Bridges and maybe partner him with somebody else, I think, or a couple draft picks, I think that's a viable option because you get more size. It's kind of the same thing, but they get a defensive player still, less of a scorer for sure, but I think they have a lot of offense over there already. So it's just understanding what players would fit in their lineups and how that would help them out as well during when you're trying to figure out trades and offers and things of that nature. But I definitely think it's worth considering for the Cavs because of what Miles Bridges means, not only on the court, but also how he operates as a enforcer for teams that need it. And I think the Cavs need it really badly this coming up season because they were questioned about toughness. And I think having the guys that they did, Max Strus, George Niang, Marcus Morris Sr., Tristan Thompson, those guys enforced that and made that change. But now it's an option of how will they keep that culture with two of the main quote unquote bad guys potentially walking out the door. Next question is, what would you say are the percent chance that Mitchell signs an extension, and what Oh, this is spelled wrong, but it's what the hell is taking so long to hire a coach? So I got into the coach stuff earlier, but what would you say are the percent chance that Mitchell signs an extension? I think I'm pretty confident about Mitchell signing an extension. I would say about 75 to 80%, just because the coaching changed, just because of the conversation that Donovan Mitchell has had with potential new hire coaches and how he signed off on some of the guys. I think that is a big thing for keeping Donovan happy and understanding that he's been in conversation and talking with, now being able to talk with um, guys about their comfortability with the team, what they want to do. And I think it's important to understand how much this Cavs organization is willing to do, one, to keep Donovan Mitchell happy, but also to get him to sign this extension. And I think he's noticing that. And I think that it is a good chance for Donovan Mitchell to sign an extension with Cleveland. Also, let me say this. I also think it's the best situation for Donovan Mitchell right now in the NBA league. Like, the Cavs are literally on the cusp of the Eastern Conference Finals. I believe that if it comes down to it, the Cavs could be the third or fourth best team in the East. And we've seen that with everything that happened this playoffs, you cannot count anybody out. We saw the Milwaukee Bucks fumble. We saw the Philadelphia 76ers deal with injuries and things of that nature. And how the Cavs held themselves to a different standard this playoff season. They got to the Eastern Conference semifinals for the first time without LeBron James since 1993. I mean, if you go and get a two-way wing, if you go and get someone that is an enforcer that can hold his own and can make three-pointers and things of that nature, I think this Cavs team takes a next level step. And also, we've talked about it with Chris, and I cannot reiterate this enough. If Evan Mobley takes a step, if Evan Mobley comes back with a sharp shooting three-point shot, is able to knock down 40%, 35-40% from three-point range, with shooting three pointers a game, that's a different level. And I think you would see that, and also understanding that there could be moves made to make room for new stars to also help Donovan Mitchell, because we've still been hearing the rumors of Darius Garland trades, of Jared Allen trades, and all of those things taken into account will make a factor in what Donovan Mitchell does. All right, so the next question is, oh boy, I like this one. It's from Air Force Sarge. He says, who would they rather have? Talking about the Cavs, Dean Wade or Isaac Okoro. And Fedor can't even answer why he thinks Wade is more valuable than Okoro. Wade, 4 to 5 points per game, a few rebounds, subpar three-pointer, shooter who cannot create his own shot. Okoro, the most athletic player on the team, 9 to 10 points per game, one of the best wing defenders in the entire NBA. With the right coaching, easily a 15 to 20 points per game player. And I'm not going to disagree with that. I think Isaac, like I said earlier, in a different offense, Isaac could definitely increase his production. So let's look at some of these numbers, because I think this is an interesting topic that needs to be talked about. And we've talked about it a couple times on this podcast, but I want to get into it for this subtext here today. I mean, so Isaac Okoro averaged 9.4 points per game this past season on 49% from the field and 39.1% from three-point range. I believe Dean Wade shot the same exact percentage as Isaac Okoro. He shot, so Dean Wade had averaged 5.4 points per game on 39.1% from three and 41.4% from the field. We understand that most of, if not all of, Dean Wade's shots were coming from the perimeter, while Isaac Okoro averaged 7 field goals a game, with 3.1% of those being from three-point range. So that's a different margin, while Dean Wade averaged 4.3 field goal attempts and 3.7 from 3-point range. So yeah, that's a very small margin for error there. But I think the conversation comes back to Dean Wade being one of the best perimeter defenders and being able to play multiple positions. Dean Wade can guard from, I want to say, from the 2 to the 5, and he can play from the 3 to the 5. So the opportunity to put him on different defenders, but also understanding that when Dean Wade plays with confidence, he's an entirely different player. Like, I wrote an article for cleveland.com saying that if Dean Wade is healthy, that the Cavs will have a better possibility of making it to the Eastern Conference Finals and an NBA Finals. He's been hurt so much going into the playoffs in his career, and I think if he was able to play to his potential, be able to have the confidence that he needed, that it would be a completely different story when it comes to his ability to produce, especially coming into the playoff series. I mean, I think the Cavs have reached the playoffs in back-to-back years for the first time since the 2016 and 2017-18 seasons, but Wade only participated in 5 of the team's 17 playoff games over the last 2 years. Like, that tells you about his injuries and things of that nature. On the other hand of that, Isaac Okoro has been healthy and still not been able to play at his maximum standard. He's been run off the court in back-to-back years of playoff experience against the Knicks, and then again against both the Boston Celtics and against the Orlando Magic this year. I mean, sure, he had some games where he would go off. Like there was one game where he had 9 points, and we thought that could have been the beginning of something great for Isaac Okoro, but it just fizzled out because when Isaac doesn't get the amount of opportunities that he needs, he slows down. The other thing for Dean Wade is that Dean was able to come in after not playing a game for until game 3 of the Eastern Conference semifinals and hit his first 3, right? That sent the crowd into an eruption, and we understand that he did not be able to hold that standard, but being able to just come in and hit the first shot says a lot for what he's able to do for this team. You also look at the defensive numbers. Dean Wade, defense is where both of them hold their hat, right? Throughout the regular season of players who played 50 or more games, Dean Wade ranked 3rd in defensive rating, 103.5 in the NBA. He was 1st in the Cavs in defensive rating and net rating, and his net rating was comparable to these players. Listen to this. Jaylen Brown, Jalen Brunson, Jamal Murray, and Kawhi Leonard. He had a better net rating than Jamal Murray and Kawhi Leonard. He had an 8.3 net rating, and Jaylen Brown had 8.7, and Jalen Brunson had 8.6. Jamal Murray had 8.2. Kawhi Leonard also had 8.2. So you understand what he was able to contribute, and Isaac Okoro kind of struggled covering some of the better players in the NBA in the NBA playoffs. Dean Wade came in and guarded Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown and was able to stifle them. Like, this is not a knock on Isaac Okoro's ability to play defense. I will never critique Isaac Okoro's defense because we understand what he was able to do for an entire season. We understand that he is one of those guys that can guard almost anybody on the court. But when Wade was guarding Tatum as the primary defender, Dean Wade came back and played in the playoffs and was basically on one leg, because he literally said that he had tears in his knee and came back and did everything he could to play. When Wade was Tatum's primary defender, he matched up with Jason Tatum for more than 12 minutes. The Celtics' highest scorer during the playoffs and regular season and NBA Finals was held to 3 of 12 from the field for 8 points and had just 2 attempts at the free throw line. That's what you need from a guy that's coming back from injury and showing you that he is willing to fight, willing to play, and willing to do whatever it takes to help a team win. Did it end up turning into a win? No, but you understand the ability of Dean Wade. And I don't think you can say, like, when the Cavs were without Evan Mobley and Darius Garland and were starting Isaac Okoro and Dean Wade, or had Dean Wade in the starting lineup and brought Isaac Okoro in, whatever it was, when Isaac Okoro and Dean Wade were on the court together along with Evan Mobley, that's like a vacuum. You are not, it's very, very difficult to score. And that was one of my favorite lineups of the season. Donovan Mitchell, Evan Mobley, Dean Wade and Isaac Okoro, because you got to see Isaac and Dean Wade match up with the two best perimeter scorers for the opposing team. Evan Mobley still being able to play safety basically and guard the back line. And then you got Donovan Mitchell not even really guarding his defender, but reading passing lanes and getting steals. There was a stretch where Donovan Mitchell was averaging like 3, 4, 5 steals a game because of having that mindset, having that setup and scheme of having those three other fantastic defenders in Isaac Okoro, Dean Wade, and Evan Mobley, while Donovan Mitchell was able to use his basketball IQ, which is one of the highest in the league, to do what he had to create open opportunities on the other end of the floor. And for that to say, I think if the Cavs had to weigh the importance of Dean Wade and Isaac Okoro, they're going to take Dean Wade because, one, you have seen that even though he's not a scorer, he is able to hold his own on the defensive end in a playoff setting, even while being injured. 2, Isaac Okoro has not shown himself in a playoff environment yet. He's been a guy that the Cavs have consistently questioned, and he's also a guy that you have to think about whether or not he's a 82-game player and a 16-game player, which we talked about. And right now it seems like he's an 82-game player. And the Cavs want to take the next step. And I believe Dean Wade will help them do that. I believe Isaac Okoro could play a part in that, but if he's not around or if there's a necessity for a choice, Dean Wade is the one to go with. All right. I think I have gotten through all the subtext questions for today, and that little tangent from by me, I think, is the way that I want to end this podcast. So, with that being said, that'll wrap up today's episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. But remember to become a Cavs insider and interact with Chris and me by subscribing to Subtext. Sign up for a 14-day free trial or visit cleveland.com/Cavs and click on the blue bar at the top of the page. If you don't like it, that's fine. All you have to do is text the word STOP. It's easy, but we can tell you that the people who sign up stick around because this is the best way to get insider coverage on the Cavs from me and Chris. This isn't just our podcast, it's your podcast. And the only way to have your voice heard is through Subtext. Y'all be safe. We out.